My Gravana Melanin, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to be making this video on archetypes and what they all mean to us and why it is so important to discover the own archetype that you take into your being. So Carl Jung was the one to kind of bring in the idea of the archetypes in the unconscious collective. And this plays out as our roles that we take on in the world. Now, he was suggesting that when we are in the unconscious mind, the archetypal energy that we take on will play out in our lives and we will be unaware of it. So I'm going to go through some of the different archetypes that are mainly in the world, but they're not the only ones. And an archetype is really a collective understanding of a behavior or a pattern of a particular idea, an idealized type of being or soul type. So your soul can take on different archetypes that were written into the collective story, and that's why people can identify, well, what is the archetype of a wizard? What is the archetype of a caregiver? These are all the types of archetypes that are in our collective, and we unconsciously and also can consciously take them into our beings, and they actually will change the way that you experience your reality. And if you're doing it unconsciously, you are just going to be put into life situations in which you're going to be playing out that archetypal role, and you won't even really know it until you have your spiritual awakening and understand what you are doing. So I drew out, because I work in pictures in my mind, what an archetypal energy means in the unconscious collective and how I visualized it. I always start out with our collective consciousness, meaning it is the prime source, it is the 0 point, it is our unity consciousness, it's our collective. I call it the collective. It's not the unconscious collective, because the unconscious collective is what the collective is kind of hiding from itself, or it's in the subconscious mind as kind of the program or the storyline that we are moving along on. So the collective consciousness is where we go when we die. It is where we go back to before we are redistributed and enter into the physical plane to experience another life. This is where we are one, and all energies in the universe collapse into one and return back to the 0 point, which is the place of potential energy before the Big Bang. And so there is not just one Big Bang, but there are infinite amounts of Big Bangs. And that's something that scientists are trying to figure out. But when you're in touch with the collective energies and you're attuned to them, you have this understanding that the Big Bang is something that happens again and again, infinite amounts of times, because the collective consciousness is infinite energy. And that's the most wonderful thing. When you awaken, you really do feel your immortal energy coursing through your body. So we have the collective right here, and this is the spiritual plane. So this is the immaterial plane. And this is still in the spiritual plane, in the realm of thought, in the realm of conscious thought. So this is the potential energy. So the collective unconscious playing the roles starts to develop a storyline. And this is not the only categories, but I put together an idea of what the different categories mean and symbolize to the collective. When you think about the collective consciousness that we come from, there is freedom involved, and freedom is chaos. Now, freedom has a very positive connotation in that you're liberated and you're free and you're not oppressed and you're not made to follow any other's orders. So freedom does have a positiveness to it, but it is chaotic. It is not in order. it is free to go wherever it wants. And we see examples of that in the universe with the chaotic kind of seemingly randomness that happens. Then we have the spiritual. So we have glimmers and fragments of the spiritual realm. And these are the energies that we cannot see, but we feel very close to us. This is the realms of where, the angels are, and fairyland, and anything that resides in our consciousness and we feel close to, but we cannot see. That's the spiritual realm. We also have the connection or the social realm of the Unity Collective, because the Unity consciousness is one, but it is also all souls in the universe. So there is this need to connect to one another, to express itself as love. We express ourselves as love when we meet others that we can connect to and can experience those feelings of love and friendship. So this is connection and social that represents the Unity consciousness. Then we have divine order, or order in general. Order is what reflects the collective, because if we have chaos, we also have to have order. Those are the two movements of the physical universe as well as the immaterial spiritual collective, that we have this chaotic randomness and we're all separated and we go our own ways. But then there's order once again, in which everything is brought together and is recognized for its divine order and its righteous place as far as being part of the same collective consciousness. So when you go through the archetypes that Carl Jung described, he had set out some particular archetypes, and I named them maybe a different name. If you go on different websites, there'll be different names, but the general idea of the archetypes is that you have the explorer, you have the outlaw or the rebel, you have the jester. These types of archetypal energies will be in the freedom realm because they're unattached to the rest of society and they kind of do their own thing. In The Lord of the Rings, the explorer was Bilbo Baggins. He was the first hobbit to move from the Shire and to explore, and he, went on his journey, defeated a dragon and all of that. So he is recognized as the archetype of having the explorer. He takes that into his being. And then you have the outlaw and the rebel. The outlaw and the rebel in Lord of the Rings is Sauron, or Melkor, if you want to go to the Silmarillion days of the very beginning of Arda. The outlaw rebel archetype is the one that breaks away from the Unity consciousness, the Unity collective. So in the story in the very beginning story, and in all almost creation myths on Earth, you have the story of how we had gods and goddesses bind together, and then you had that one, Hades, Lucifer. You have that one type of energy that pulls away from the collective, and that was Melkor. He was the Ainur that pulled away from Eru Iluvatar, and so he is the rebel. He represents the rebel type of archetype. And then you have the jester, which is the comedic relief, but also a trickster, a manipulator. And it usually functions to serve the rebel, the high archetypal energy of the rebel. So Gollum worked in a way for that Melkor energy of discord, but represented the shadow self of Frodo and Bilbo. And so you see the jester archetype with the Gollum character, and that's why he liked riddles and he was interested in playing the game of riddles. The jester archetype is someone that likes to make fun of society but is part of the freedom and the chaos. You could see this in the Joker as well, in the Batman versus Joker. So you have these archetypes that reside in the collective unconscious, and those are the roles that play out. Then we have the connection and the social. These are the social-based type of archetypes. The lover. This is someone that is constantly in search of love and connecting to others. This is very much described in Arwen's character in Lord of the Rings. Arwen was a character that really defined that type of archetype, that she would leave her people, she would leave her destiny, walk away, and she had a little bit of the freedom chaos in her. She would walk away from the unit of the elves and pursue her own destiny, or make her own destiny, and follow her heart, follow her greatest love, which was Aragorn. So she represents the lover archetype. And then you have the caregiver. The caregiver, there were many different caregivers in Lord of the Rings, but I did analyze and I decided that Sam was actually the caregiver archetype. He was the one to care for Frodo. While Frodo was dragging with the ring and didn't want to go on, what was so lovely about Samwise' character was that he represented the caregiver. And this archetype tends to be like the guardian angel. So Samwise was the guardian angel, and I think that was what was so touching about the relationship to Frodo, was that Frodo had Sam. And so a lot of people try to actually have an argument that Samwise was really the hero because Frodo wanted to give up so many times, but Sam was the one that just kept on really pushing Frodo to the end. And so Sam is the caregiver archetype. And then you have the everyman type of archetype, which Carl Jung explained as the one that they were acting out the role of feeling like a normal person that really didn't have any type of special paths or destinies or purpose, and was always trying to connect to others and feel like they belonged. And so I put the other hobbits and the friends that wanted to join with Frodo and be part of that journey. So these are the types of archetypes that I identified in Lord of the Rings that were socially and connection based. And then the archetypal energies in Lord of the Rings that were connected to the spirit of Iluvatar, or represented that, was the magician. The magician was Gandalf, of course. So he was the one that could do magic and could really symbolize bringing the whole group together and having that wisdom and that knowledge about kind of the themes that were going on in the spiritual realm and understanding his greater purpose. When he transitioned from Gandalf the Grey to the White, that symbolized his advancement into becoming more of an authority figure within the spiritual plane, so that he could go back to Middle Earth and really serve the collective in that story of Lord of the Rings, of the light beating out the darkness. So that's the magician, making things happen through moving energy and using the will and intention to create things around in reality for yourself and for others. A lot of people take on that archetype, and Gandalf did, and the elves do as well, but you see more of the sage archetype with them, because Galadriel and Elrond were the ones that Gandalf sent to get counsel or advice. Even though the elves don't give counsel, as a famous quote of Tolkien, that meant that the elves do not say, do this, do that. It means that they will suggest, because they are in touch with the spiritual collective story that's playing out. So they know where to lead and guide the fellowship and how to guide them, because they have the visions of what is going to happen in the future. It might not be completely solid and there, but they are in touch and they represent the spiritual aspect of the collective. And then you have the creator and the artist archetype, which is a being that is awakened to themselves as a co-creator within the story, and so they create art and create things that are going to actually bring forth the story or progress it. And I would say that Tolkien was that. He even said that we are sub-creators, we are co-creators, so he very much took on that role as a creator. And I know that he wasn't in the story, but he wrote the story, and so I'm saying his archetype that he took on in this world, in reality, was the creator and the artist that would bring those visions to life for us to see, because artists are usually connected to the spiritual realm in order to bring down the messages to the world to understand what is going on in the spiritual plane. And then we have the divine order category here, in which this role plays out to harness the chaos or balance out the chaos of the other characters and archetypes that are going on. You have the ruler and the hero and the innocent. The ruler is the king that wants to bring forth order in a positive way, not the tyrant, but can become a tyrant, of course. If they are away from the unity consciousness and they're really stuck in their ego, they can become a tyrant because they're not listening to the words of the collective or the words of the masses around them, but they want everything to happen their terms and on their way only, so they're not open to other ideas at all. Then you have the hero, which is represented in the archetype of Aragorn. Aragorn and Frodo and Éowyn. What's lovely about Lord of the Rings is that their characters actually took on more than one archetype, and that's when you have a really good story. Is if you have a story that is one-dimensional and you have one type of archetype within a character, what ends up happening is that story, well, it's flat. There's no character development. You don't see that multi-dimensional aspect of that character. So with Tolkien, the story of Aragorn was really wonderful because he had a little bit of creator within him. He had a little bit of the sage. Sometimes he could give really wonderful advice, and he seemed like he was really connected to what was going on and attuned to some higher powers. But he was also the ruler, and he was also the hero as well. And Frodo was the innocent. The innocent is somebody that also works towards order, doesn't really know it, but is working towards a utopian or peaceful type of society that's free, but also fair and equal for everyone. And so the innocent is the one that really wants to see the world in a better light. And Frodo had a little bit of that innocent archetype within him, but he also had the hero archetype as well. So we have all of these archetypes working together to create the story of Lord of the Rings. And of course, I didn't mention all the characters, but you can go in and you can kind of analyze, now that you know the major archetypes, 12 archetypes that Carl Jung described, and you could go on and you can research more about it if you want to. Now you can see what he was seeing within humans and what they take into their being. Now, he only described really the collective unconscious archetypes that were playing out. And when they are in the unconscious, what happens is you have the unity consciousness together, collectively dreaming up the story that's going to play. So you have these different roles set out, different souls that have bits and pieces of the archetypal energy within them. So a soul will come down to earth and will already have these stories within their subconscious. And when they get to earth, if they are a hero archetype, what they may find is that they're always put up against a villain or a bully, or they are always feeling a need to stick up for others because you carry that hero storyline. So of course, your type of events in your life are going to push you to act out that way. So let's start at the very beginning and let's go through all 12, and I'll show you just a little bit of a hint, just a little bit of an example of how these archetypal energies that you take on into your soul will play out in your life. And you may not even know it because it's in the subconscious, but until you are fully conscious and aware, and even aware of the things that are within your subconscious, that's when you can start to change those roles that you play. So if someone takes into their being the explorer archetype, when they come down to earth, They will not be able to sit still. They will want to travel everywhere and to explore. And this takes place not only on the physical, but also in the emotional or mental. They have a hard time of committing. So when they're up against something that makes them want to stay still and really hold them down in the same place, they will feel this urge to fight against it because they have that archetype within them to fight against it. And that's the role they play. If they have an outlaw or the rebellious type of archetype, now I'm going to give you an example because I talk about him on my channel and I have in the past, but on one of his videos in The Rise of the Revenants, Morg Official says that the Illuminati called in the Lucifer archetype into his being. So what does that make him? Makes him the rebel or the outlaw of society, the one doing things that are kind of going against the grain of society and trying to break away from the order and is representing the chaos. Doesn't mean he's Lucifer, no, because anyone can embody the Lucifer archetype or that energy within them if they are about disrupting the order or the flow of society and bringing us more into a chaotic state. Now, there are some good and there are some negative aspects of this. It is about that particular soul of where they really want to go. Now, they can bring chaos and disorder like Melkor did by harming others and really enforcing their will upon others and harming others and killing them. I mean, that can be something that can be done. Or they can simply bring in new ideas and try to break away from the mainstream. So when someone says, I'm Lucifer, or I'm bringing in that energy, well, that's what it means, is that they're actually bringing in the outlaw, rebellious archetype into their being. If you do bring in the outlaw, rebellious energy into your being, when you're down here in the physical plane, you're going to meet those that are in this area. You're going to meet light workers. You're going to meet those that are going to have kind of an archangel archetype within them, and they will feel they have to battle you. So this is where this battle happens, and this is where that battle plays out, is down here. But it is actually formed within the unconscious collective. So when you are aware of those roles, you then can get past the unconscious story that's going on, go back to here, and experience divine love for even the one that you are trying to battle. So roles can start to dissolve, and you won't have to feel such an emotional push to battle others when you can dissolve the archetype within you, or at least become conscious of it. So just be aware of those roles that you're playing out. And I know very much my role that I'm playing out as well. But I'm also aware of the unity consciousness, so I don't get too intense about it, I should say. Jester, Golem. If you are taking in the archetype of the Jester and you come down here, well, you're going to be the class clown, aren't you? You're going to question your teacher, you're going to be a trickster, you're going to, maybe even in the negative aspect of things, you might want to manipulate others, you might want to tempt them. And our story about Lucifer within the Bible and within lots of different creation myths around the world, Satan is the trickster, the manipulator. So that is the archetype that takes on in a negative aspect. It's no longer just playing little tricks on people, but is trying to tempt and manipulate others. Jester archetypes are also seen in fairies. Fairies have been talked about for a very long time in folklore and in legends, that they play tricks on humans. So that is a fairy that is towards manipulating and taking on the archetype of the jester. And then we can go to the social connection route here. So if you are a lover archetype, you're going to come to Earth with that soul type and be on the mission to find true love and to find your heart, connect to others, and to really be on the search for love. So a lot of people will take on that archetype within their being. And they don't know why, but something pushes them towards finding, the love of their life and the someone that's going to complete them. And so just be aware of that you can find love with all souls. It just depends on what it is that you're really looking for in your life. So if you have a lover archetype, one of the negative aspects of this is feeling like you can never find love and that no one can really satisfy the yearning inside of you. There's a couple different ways of love that's described within Greek mythology and just the Greek idea of what love is. And one of the loves, agape and eros, and all those types of loves, they will end up breaking a heart or making you completely lovesick. And some people pine away because they are taking on that archetype of the lover, and so they must pine away if they don't find their true love on earth. So just be aware that taking on that archetype on any of the archetypes can have a negative or a positive leaning in the idea that they can cause you pain or they can bring forth joy. Caregiver archetype. The caregiver archetype is someone that takes on the guardian angel within their being, and they feel that they need to take care of others and help others and heal others. So people will take on that. A lot of people feel like earth angels. A lot of people feel like, oh, I'm the archangel in person now. That's because it's in your makeup. Yes, in a way, you are an angel. You are an archangel because you have taken on that archetype into your being, and that is how you were born on earth. But there is a negative side to this. You can feel like you need to just let go of all of your needs and suffer and almost be like martyr for others in order to take care of them. So just be aware that the caregiver can suffer in life if they allow themselves to get too caught up within that unconscious story that's playing out in their subconscious mind. And then you have the everyman. We have a lot of souls here, a lot of souls, but because of the consciousness awakening, they're taking on more archetypes into their being, and they're starting to wake up to their multidimensional self. But the everyman archetype is somebody who comes down here and feels like they have no purpose and they're really nobody special, and nothing really is connected, and they're trying to find their way and they're trying to find their place on earth. And so they really try to join up with kind of the society and the masses, but they really don't feel like they know who they really are. And what happens is this person needs to have a spiritual awakening, and then they take into their being other types of archetypes that kind of awaken into that story of what else they can play. And so the spirit archetype, the magician, someone who is working with magic in real life right now, all these witches and Wiccans and even Satanists, the ones who are playing with the dark arts and things like that. Not Satanists that are more LaVey Satanists, that are more philosophical Satanists, but I'm talking about those that actually dabble in ritual dark magic. They are taking on the archetype of the magician. They are becoming sorcerers and moving energy at their will and putting forth the rituals and focusing their intent on what they want to see happen. They're taking on that archetype. When they come into the world, they are going to have magic at their fingers. They're going to be interested in doing magic. They're going to be awakening to their abilities. They're going to have these types of situations in their life that will come up that will fulfill this role of being the magician and playing that out. The sage archetype. This archetype, I'm discovering, awakens later on in your life. Although some children can have it, this archetype plays out once you awaken to your other archetypes and you decide that you're playing out this role now to help the collective. This is the Gladriel, the Elrond character. This is the sage that has awakened to many things that are going on and wants to be a guide for others to help them in their confusion and suffering. So, of course, I and many others are taking on the sage archetype, and so you might feel like you're a shaman, or you might feel that you're interested in developing those gifts and connecting to the spirit realm so that you can get and gather more information to bring to others. And then, of course, we have the creator and the artist archetype. Many people are developing this right now. Anyone who is awaken into their goddess self, their God self, and are becoming artists, are creating music and drawing and painting and even just writing and just making maybe YouTube videos, you certainly are bringing in that aspect of yourself here to the material world. So a lot of souls, when they come to earth, they might not be right away in this, because as children, we are more in the innocent realms of the archetypal energy. But eventually you wake up into this creator artist archetype, and you embody that. And so what ends up happening here is your life starts to show that you are creating your reality, and you start to be able to make more wiser choices that are going to bring you into better situations for yourself. And you're going to start to create, draw, sing, dance, do things that are going to visually show others what is inside of your mind and what it is that you're wishing to bring to earth for others to see and to enjoy. And a lot of creator artists are light workers because they bring in really highly attuned spiritual artwork to the material world so that others can feel inspired and really kind of rise above kind of the suffering and the pain that goes on earth. We're showing there's some real beauty that is actually in the spiritual realm and in our very essence. And it really is just about tapping into that potential. So that's how that archetype plays out. And you will wake up in your life, and you'll have these very interesting situations where you're just going to discover, like, everything is one, everything's within me, and I'm within everything, and that's how other souls are as well. And you'll recognize, and that's when namaste starts to play in, as well as when you really feel that meaning of the word and you actually recognize the divine light inside of other souls. You are embodying that creator archetype within you. And then the divine order. If you are taking on the ruler archetype into your being, well, you're going to come down to earth and you're going to feel like you have to lead. You have to start something. You have to be part of bringing forth change. And like I said, you can become a tyrant. Of course, Hitler had that archetype playing in his subconscious. He felt he had to rule over others, and he had to, bring about this change that was a vision in his mind. So of course it can be in a negative aspect, but you can also come down here and be a very positively leaning leader that wants to help everyone and be a very giving or generous leader that wants to make sure that everybody is living the best life possible for themselves and in full of equality on earth. And then, of course, like I said, the hero archetype. When you're here, now if you take on the hero archetype, be sure and be prepared that when you're on earth, you're going to battle others. You're going to be put up against others because it's a way to reinforce that storyline. It's just like when you read a book. When you read a book, if a character takes on a particular role, well then the events and the situations will force that character to come up against themselves and realize what role they're playing. So when you are on earth, if you have embodied that archetype, that's why you are always fighting others or feeling like you're fighting against others that seem in the wrong to you because you are taking on the hero, right? So you're feeling for the downtrodden. You're feeling like you have to help others and you have to fight and protect those that take on the archangel type of archetype into their being, those that feel very close to archangels and work with archangels. Let me say, when you call on certain deities or angels or demons into your being, what you're actually doing is you're bringing that archetypal energy into yourself. So when you're calling a certain angel, like I worked a lot with Archangel Haniel, so I started to bring that into me and I started to feel like I was embodying her essence. So then, of course, when I come down to earth, of course, I'm going to feel like I have to protect others and I have to be part of that story. So be prepared, because I can tell you with personal experience that when you embody the hero archetype, you're going to be placed into situations that will require you to step up and be the hero and play that role. Just be aware that it can go the opposite way, where you can be a hero that steps all over others, and it can be too much in the ego where you can cause your own kind of pain and suffering because others will fight against you. And you have to know when to put down the sword. You have to know when to put down the pen. You have to know when to just choose your battles. Not everything in life needs to be fought and about, but choose your battles. Choose the values that you really believe in. And if you are on earth and you embody that archetype, choose your battles so that you do not lead a life full of just fighting, because it can get very draining. And that's something that I personally had to realize about myself. If you embody the innocent archetype, well, then you are going to be looking for a world of peace and a society of kind of a utopian society. Of course, I embody that archetype. The innocent is the one that is going to be very in touch with the fairy realm and very in touch with those realms of consciousness, the angelic realms of consciousness, because their intentions are for the betterment of the collective. But something that can happen to the innocent is that when you get too attached to that and you realize that the duality on earth is going on and there's really nothing you can do about it, do not get into despair and lose yourself. A lot of people can get very depressed. This is where suicidal tendencies happen and depression can happen. If you embody that archetype and you want the world to be completely peaceful and utopian, you need to be patient with yourself. I would say that the innocent needs to grow up a bit. The innocent archetype energy within you needs to grow up a bit. And when it does, it can take on more of the sage, more of the magician type of archetype energy. And then that is what allows you to have a bit of the utopian, positive, optimistic type of spirit, but you do not fall into despair thinking that you should just leave this earth. It's not for you anymore, because I was there and I can tell you that taking on that story, when you're here, you're going to feel a bit like a victim. You're going to feel like, well, I'm not made for this world. And that's because that subconscious story is playing out in your mind, and you just need to remind yourself that it makes you who you are, and it's wonderful to be an optimistic person and to see the better parts of people, as a lot of people do when they take on that archetype, but just be aware of what you're doing. So becoming conscious of your archetypal energies that you take in allows you to control them so that they don't control you. So in a way, it is about like a program. It's almost like a rewiring of your program. When you awaken, you realize what you are doing. So these are the main 12 archetypes that play out on Earth. And of course, there's some other ones, but these are the general type of categories that people play out. Now, why am I telling you all of this? I am telling you all of this because I am really interested in the collective awakening together. And so when we are aware of the stories and the roles that we play, we can be on Earth having more of this unity consciousness. So we can still have this play out, because this is a wonderful way of experiencing life. But when you're unaware of this, you're on Earth and you realize, I have no free will. You think things happen to you. When you're aware of the collective unconscious archetypes that are playing out in other souls around you, then you can recognize it for what it is and not get so angry at your fellow beings and not get so full of despair. And this is when hate, racism, grudges, frustration, stress, all those things that we feel towards others play out, because the roles and the stories play out, and people will be bumping against each other. So just remember that. There is a really beautiful part of the story as well. When souls that take on and embody the same archetypes meet each other, like when a sage meets another sage, it's like a point of recognition. When a ruler meets another ruler, well, there can be some competition, but at least there's some recognition within. When a hero meets another hero, oh, you're on the same team as me. We're fighting against the darkness. We're fighting against those that want to cause chaos in society. When you meet an outlaw and another outlaw, oh yes, anarchists forever. We're going to destroy society and rebuild it in the way that we want. You know, when you meet those other souls who are playing the subconscious stories out, that's when you feel a kinship. That's when you feel the friendship. And so elven souls have a bit of a mix of these archetypes within them. Elven souls have the sage archetype. Elven souls have the magician archetype, and elven souls have the creator and the artist archetype. A bit of the innocent and much of the hero, and maybe some of the ruler as well. And of course the lover, and if the caregiver, not so much the everyman, although there can be a tendency, because if an elf feels like, I just want to be in the forest and left alone, and I just want to join in society and not really take on a mission or a purpose, then yes, they can have that. And then, of course, elves can have the explorer archetype. They want to see the world. They want to travel and enjoy nature in many of its different forms and locations. And of course, the elf can have a little bit of a jester and play and love to laugh and have fun and maybe be one to make others laugh by playing tricks on them. Not bad tricks, but just, you know, make fun and bring to surface a brevity and a lightness. And then maybe elves can also have a bit of an outlaw, a rebellious nature to them as well, and be upset with the way that society is happening, so they feel a little bit like that. But when we take one archetype into our being, we will feel it very strong within us. When we take more archetypes within our being, you'll have a little bit of everything, so the energy won't be as intense. And that's why the elves were detached more emotionally and can be detached, because they're connected to the unity consciousness of Eru Luvatar, and they knew their divinity. So when humans become sovereign beings, they will take on more archetypes collectively and consciously, and will create the world knowing this. And maybe the archetypes that they'll take into their being more will be the creator aspect, and will be the sage aspect. And when we have all of these roles kind of playing out, we can have more of the ones that are positively aligned will be helping the collective move and progress it into a world that is a little bit more peaceful, because people will have more wisdom within them to not fight over the most ridiculous things and petty things, and they won't forget who they really are deep inside, and that everything is connected to them. So this is really why I am going through this, is because I'm really interested in people understanding the stories that are playing out in their lives and how you can start to change it. Once you awaken and you're on earth and you're aware of your archetypes that you embody, you can then actually change your archetype. So if you're somebody that has been playing the innocent all your life, and you just feel like a victim in the world, and you feel like everything is happening to you, and the world is not that utopian, peaceful way that you really want it to, and you feel very depressed about it, well, if you become conscious of that program that is playing out in your subconscious, you could jump right into the next archetype, and it actually can take on the hero, take on the ruler, become a leader of an organization that you really want to change, make some changes in the world so you don't feel so powerless any longer. Or you want to be a sage and want to maybe disregard what's going on in a way, in an emotional way, and more so guide people towards more of the truth that you are connected to spiritually. There is a lot of different archetypes that you can take on, and you can choose the divine masculine, the divine feminine, the idea of archangels, the idea of certain gods and goddesses that you really admire and idolize, you can actually take on their qualities. And that is where you start to feel like you resonate with those particular entities or energies, and you become that on earth. But you're conscious of yourself, and it's no longer a program that's just kind of running in your life and making you do things and you don't even know why. The whole point of the journey is to become conscious of yourself so that you understand why you make certain choices and why you are doing certain things, because your life will continue to bring up situations and events that you have not cleared yet. And clearing them just means that you're not aware of yet. They're still in the subconscious. That's why Carl Jung was so interested in helping people realize what is the shadow within their subconscious, because that is what will play out in their lives and they don't even know it. And that's what makes them do some of the harmful things towards others, or the things that, maybe are not so good. And we always have those negative aspects within ourselves. But when we become conscious and aware, and we actually look at the root of the issue and the storyline that we're playing out with other souls, we become then conscious co-creators together, and we then take real control over our lives and control where our destiny goes, and really decide for ourselves who we want to become. And when you take on certain aspects of the archetypal energies, such as the priestess or the hierophant, the magician or sorcerer, the Jesus archetypal energy, when you take on those particular energies into your being, they will alter you forever, and you will feel that type of change and shift within you, and then they will make a new experience to play out in your life, and you will feel your life shift in a way. And I believe that it's a very positive thing. Of course, it can go into the negative, because we saw with magicians even that it can lean towards the negative. With Saruman, he chose to go after power with Sauron. So we can always lean towards the negative, even in the spiritual realm or the spiritual based archetypes. So just be aware of that. And just try to recognize, what are the archetypal energies that are playing into your life? What are you embodying? And this might clear up and give you more clarity that if you feel like you are embodying the earth angel or the starseed archetype, that's a new archetype that is actually coming into the collective story, because above Earth, on the other side of Earth, are other types of planets. And this story of humanity moving the advanced technology to actually communicate and connect to those other beings on other planets, well, of course, then we'll have that starseed archetype, which will come in. And the starseed archetype has a subconscious story playing out in which they feel a role is to help humanity move towards meeting other alien species and moving towards that. So it's all part of the collective consciousness, and even aliens on other planets all over the multi-universes will have this type of storyline play out. And it's not going to be the same roles, of course, but they are going to still play out in lives until you are aware. When you become aware of them, they will play out in your life, but you will be aware that they are. So just be aware of the archetypes that are playing out within your life and become conscious of them so that you can control them, and it's not a program that's just playing out. And you can decide which way you want to go, and make sure that you're not being pulled towards more of the negative aspect of these archetypes in which they cause you suffering or they cause others suffering as well. And once you are aware, then you can choose to really love others as they are and understand where they're coming from. And I have a video coming up on divine love and what that really means, because it's not exactly the way that people have been seeing love. And even today's world, we have people say that, well, love is not the answer. It's the type of love that you will experience inside that will lead you to the answer towards peace and harmony with others. So I will have another video coming up on that. So Han and Lei for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.